For much of the modern world, Iran dominates the headlines. It is a nation associated with geopolitical tension, nuclear ambitions, secret alliances, and deep historical rivalries in the Middle East. But what many people do not realize is that the story of Iran stretches far beyond modern politics. In fact, the history of Iran appears repeatedly in one of the most influential books ever written, the Bible. However, the Bible does not call it Iran. Instead, it refers to the nation by its ancient name, Persia. From the earliest genealogies after the Great Flood to the prophetic visions of the end times, Persia occupies a remarkable place in biblical history. At different moments, it appears as an adversary, a liberator, a protector of Israel, and even a participant in future prophetic conflicts. Understanding this story requires us to travel across thousands of years, from the earliest civilizations of the ancient Near East to the prophecies recorded by the biblical prophets. Because Persia's role in history and prophecy is far more complex than many realize. Before we continue the story, if you enjoy deep history documentaries like this one, consider subscribing to the channel. Here we explore the forgotten stories of ancient civilizations, biblical history, and the real events behind the empires that shaped our world. Subscribing helps the channel grow and ensures you never miss our upcoming documentaries on ancient Persia, Babylon, Rome, and other powerful civilizations of the past. Now let's continue the story and see how the Persian Empire changed the course of history. The ancient origins of Persia. The biblical narrative begins shortly after the story of the flood in the book of Genesis. According to Genesis chapter 10, often called the Table of Nations, humanity spread across the earth through the descendants of Noah's three sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. This genealogy is more than a list of names. It is essentially an ancient map of the early world. Among these descendants, we encounter figures who would eventually be connected to the lands that later became Persia. Two names are especially important, Madai and Elam. Madai was a son of Japheth. His descendants became known as the Medes, a people who settled in the mountainous regions of northwestern Iran. Archaeological evidence suggests that by the second millennium BCE, Indo-Iranian tribes had begun migrating into the Iranian plateau, eventually forming early Median tribes. These people lived in rugged highlands and organized themselves into tribal confederations. Ancient Assyrian records from the 9th century BCE mention the Medes as fierce mountain peoples living east of Mesopotamia. The second figure, Elam, was a descendant of Shem. His people established one of the oldest civilizations in the region. The Elamite kingdom flourished in southwestern Iran, with its capital at the city of Susa. Elam was already a major regional power as early as the 3rd millennium BCE. Its culture was sophisticated, with its own language, writing system, and advanced architecture. For centuries, Elam interacted, sometimes peacefully and sometimes violently, with neighboring civilizations such as Mesopotamia. And according to the Bible, Elam even appears in one of the earliest recorded conflicts involving the patriarch Abraham, the first war in the Bible. In Genesis chapter 14, the Bible describes what many historians consider the first recorded international war. A coalition of eastern kings, including Chedorlaomer, king of Elam, invaded the land of Canaan. They attacked several cities and captured many people, including Lot, the nephew of Abraham. This episode reveals something remarkable. Elam was not a minor tribe. It was a powerful kingdom capable of projecting military power far beyond its own territory. But the story does not end there. Abraham pursued the invading forces with a small group of trained men and launched a surprise night attack. Against overwhelming odds, he defeated the coalition and rescued Lot along with the captives. And the narrative conveys a powerful theological message. No empire, no matter how strong, could overcome those who were under divine protection. Yet the peoples of Elam and Media did not disappear. Over the centuries, their cultures and populations continued to grow across the Iranian plateau. And eventually, from these ancient roots, one of the greatest empires in world history would emerge: the rise of the Persian Empire. By the 8th and 7th centuries BCE, political power in the region began shifting dramatically. The Medes gradually formed a powerful kingdom in northwestern Iran. According to classical historians like Herodotus, the Median leader Deioces united the tribes and established a capital at Ecbatana, modern-day Hamadan. The Medes soon became a formidable force in the ancient Near East. Together with the Babylonians, and they played a major role in the destruction of the Assyrian Empire, including the fall of its capital Nineveh in 612 BCE. But another power was rising in the south. These were the Persians, originally a group of Indo-Iranian tribes living in the region of Fars in southern Iran. Their most famous leader would become one of the most extraordinary figures in ancient history. His name was Cyrus the Great. Cyrus the Great and the Fall of Babylon. Cyrus began as the ruler of a relatively small Persian kingdom, but through strategic brilliance and political alliances, he quickly expanded his influence. In 550 BCE, he defeated the Median king Astyages and united the Medes and Persians into a single empire. From there, his conquests moved rapidly. Within 2 decades, Cyrus controlled an empire stretching from Central Asia to the Mediterranean. But his most famous victory came in 539 BCE, when he conquered Babylon, the greatest city of the ancient world. Remarkably, Babylon fell almost without resistance. Ancient records such as the Cyrus cylinder, discovered in modern Iraq, describe Cyrus as a ruler who respected local religions and cultures. Instead of destroying conquered peoples, he often allowed them to return to their homelands. This policy had enormous consequences for the Jewish people. Persia and the return of the Jews. After the Babylonians had destroyed Jerusalem in 586 BCE, many Jews were exiled to Babylon. For decades, they lived far from their homeland. But after conquering Babylon, Cyrus issued a decree allowing them to return to Jerusalem and rebuild their temple. This event is described in the biblical books of Ezra and Chronicles. Cyrus even provided resources for rebuilding the temple. In doing so, Persia became the empire that restored Jewish religious life after exile. For the Jewish people, this moment marked the end of 70 years of captivity, and it forever connected the Persian Empire to one of the most important turning points in biblical history: Daniel and the Vision of Empires. During this period, another key biblical figure was living in Babylon. His name was Daniel. Daniel served in the courts of several rulers, including Babylonian and later Persian kings. The book of Daniel contains a series of visions describing the rise and fall of world empires. One famous vision involved a massive statue made of different metals: gold, silver, bronze, iron, and clay. Daniel interpreted the statue as a symbolic timeline of future kingdoms. Babylon was represented by the head of gold, but the chest and arms of silver represented the empire that would replace Babylon, the Medo-Persian Empire. History confirmed this prediction. The Persian Empire would dominate the ancient world for over 2 centuries. At its height under kings such as Darius the Great and Xerxes, Persia ruled an immense territory stretching from India to Ethiopia. It was the largest empire the world had ever seen. The story of Esther in Persia. One of the most dramatic stories set during the Persian Empire appears in the Book of Esther. The events take place during the reign of King Xerxes I,
He betrays
known
the
in the
crown!
Bible as Ahasuerus. His royal court was located in Susa, one of the major capitals of the empire. According to the narrative, a Jewish woman named Esther became queen of Persia. When a royal official named Haman plotted to exterminate the Jewish population across the empire, Esther risked her life by revealing the conspiracy to the king. Her courage ultimately saved her people. The story is still commemorated each year in the Jewish festival of Purim. It also highlights how deeply Persian history intersected with Jewish history during this period. The fall of Persia. Despite its enormous power, the Persian Empire would not last forever. In 334 BCE, a young Macedonian king named Alexander the Great launched a campaign against Persia. Within just a few years, Alexander defeated the Persian armies in a series of decisive battles, including Issus and Gaugamela. By 330 BCE, the Persian Empire had collapsed. Alexander entered Persepolis, the ceremonial capital of Persia, marking the end of one of the greatest empires in ancient history. Yet Persia's cultural influence did not disappear. Persian traditions, language, and administration continued shaping the region for centuries under later empires. Persia and the birth of Jesus. Interestingly, Persia appears again in the New Testament. The Gospel of Matthew describes mysterious visitors who traveled from the east to honor the birth of Jesus. These figures are known as the Magi, often translated as wise men. Historically, the term Magi referred to a priestly class within the Persian religious tradition associated with Zoroastrianism. They were scholars, astronomers, and interpreters of dreams. Some historians believe these wise men may have come from regions influenced by the former Persian Empire. If so, their appearance in the Gospel story represents a fascinating connection. Men from the ancient lands of Persia were among the first outsiders to recognize the birth of Jesus. Persia in biblical prophecy. The final references to Persia appear in biblical prophetic literature. One of the most discussed passages is found in the book of Ezekiel, chapters 38 and 39. These chapters describe a future conflict involving a coalition of nations. Among those nations listed is Persia. The prophecy describes a powerful alliance gathering against Israel in a climactic confrontation sometimes referred to as the War of Gog and Magog. Scholars debate the precise interpretation of this prophecy, and many interpretations exist. Some view it as symbolic, others as historical, and still others as describing a future event. Regardless of interpretation, the inclusion of Persia in these passages demonstrates how deeply embedded this ancient civilization is within the biblical narrative. The legacy of Persia. The story of Persia in the Bible spans thousands of years. It begins with early tribal ancestors in Genesis. It rises to global power through the Persian Empire. It plays a central role in the return of the Jewish people from exile. It appears again in the story of Esther and the birth of Jesus. And finally, it emerges once more in prophetic visions of the future. Few nations appear so consistently across the entire biblical timeline. From ancient Elam to the Persian Empire and eventually modern Iran, this region has stood at the crossroads of world history. Empires have risen and fallen across its landscape, yet its influence continues to shape politics, religion, and culture even today. Understanding the story of Persia helps us better understand the broader history of the ancient world. It reminds us that the Middle East has always been a region where civilizations, faiths, and empires intersect. The Bible preserves one of the oldest historical narratives connected to this land. And within that narrative, Persia occupies a unique and fascinating role. From Genesis to the later prophets, from imperial power to spiritual symbolism, Persia's story remains woven into the history of humanity, and even today, thousands of years later, the echoes of that ancient history continue to resonate. Thank you for watching this documentary on the incredible history of Persia and its role in the Bible. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more deep explorations of ancient civilizations, biblical mysteries, ancient historical empires, be sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if this story fascinated you, you'll definitely want to watch the next video on your screen where we explore another powerful mystery from ancient history. Until next time, thank you for watching.